Hello there, people, and listeners to the Hungry Podcast. Today, I'm absolutely thrilled and excited to welcome my very good friend Harry Clark onto the podcast. Harry was the founder of Pops Ice Lollies, which were an alcohol-based kind of cocktail. Calippo, you're probably going to kill me for saying that, mate. Which took the scene, took to our wonderful industry in 2014. Won a whole host of listings with TESCO, Ocado, Waitrose, did amazing brand partnerships with Diageo and some of their huge brands. Harry then, unfortunately, in 2019, parted ways with his business, decided to kind of shut up shop, was ravaged. Well, this was pre-lockdown, and then has gone on to found HC Consulting, who've done some amazing work with some amazing brands that you'll know: Remio Gelato, Savyll Drinks, Holy Moly dips. Gaz has actually been on this podcast, I think, one of the first episode 3 or 5, I think.
Yeah, good man.
And now, as of this week, the day of recording this, our partnership has gone live. Harry and I have joined forces. So Hungry and HC Consulting are very much partners. We've now got into the proverbial bed together, and I'm very excited for what we can do. But mate, I'm thrilled to have you on, mate, and super excited.
Yeah, well, thanks for having me, and really looking forward to chatting. I've been listening for years, so and stoked to get the partnership off the ground. So yeah.
So I think the place I want to start, and it's never in chronological order, I jump around, which I'm sure you'll know, but you sent me something which was titled Knowing When to Stop. And I think the narrative in food and drink and entrepreneurship is, just keep going, never give in. And by and large, I agree with that to a point. Like that's the mindset I'm adopting. But they're actually also, and I don't think it's not sexy and it's not cool, but knowing how and when to quit is really important. And I think quit needs to be rebranded into when to pivot, or essentially, or when to restart.
Yeah.
So let's talk about that moment. Like, how did you know it was time to stop Pops?
So I think with all these things, there's never sort of one moment. There's always a big build up, and I think obviously what you see in the industry is sort of, you see when things do fold or people do decide to move on, people just see that one announcement or that article in the grocer or whatever that event might be, but people don't really sort of think about that. Especially as a founder, you might have known this moment was coming for quite a while. So, you've known this might have been coming so in everyone's case, it's going to be different, right? So maybe 3 months or 6 months or even a little bit longer. So I think for us, quite a lot of it was, we had some underlying probably challenges within the business. Our product that we had, which was predominantly an ice lolly product, was extremely seasonal. So we had massive sort of seasonality. We basically probably sold 80% of our revenue was probably within a sort of 12 to 16 week period, which made cash flow sort of extremely sort of lumpy. And we'd never sort of, although in those moments in the summer, everything looked like it was amazing and was kicking off, and it was. We never sort of managed to sort of have a product or a SKU or something else in the mix that would sort of even our sort of revenues out, and that makes it very difficult when you're trying to grow a team, or when you're trying to grow staff, trying to lay the sort of foundations of your business down. So we sort of struggled very much in terms of from a cash flow perspective, which essentially meant that we had to keep on raising. So we had to keep on raising pretty much at the end of every summer, as especially in a seasonal business, as lots of founders will know, you have to so for instance, if you've got a very sort of summer skewed sort of product, you essentially, so let's say, like an ice cream and ice lolly, you sell a shitload of stuff in the summer, and then you come to sort of August, September, your sales sort of naturally sort of subside. And then essentially you go through a quiet period. You hope you don't have a lot of stock at that point. And then once you get to the end of your period where you've had the slimmest sales throughout the winter, you've then got to build up all your stock for next summer. So the cash flow becomes extremely lumpy, and that for us was very sort of difficult to manage. So from a sort of business perspective, we'd diluted ourselves quite a lot, which I think is a sort of natural thing that lots of founders find, dilution, and you've got to sort of take a longer term approach and go, okay, so how much cash do I actually need to make this business into something that we feel is sort of scalable or exitable? And essentially we sort of got to a position where we thought it's probably the cash that was required to keep going was going to be too much and would mean that we need to dilute ourselves in such a way that it probably there wouldn't be enough in the business. We wouldn't have enough skin in the game. And there's probably another point, but we had some underlying probably issues in terms of rate of sale in our grocers and in our sort of retail channels. So combining those sort of rate of sale and performance, sort of cash flow and needing for cash all the time, and then also us not necessarily having as much skin in the game as we wanted. You sort of put all those points together, even though we had a very exciting, cool brand that was doing lots in the market, it becomes quite a difficult proposition to sort of keep going with.
Yeah, we're definitely going to talk about the seasonality. I think it would be good to double click on the cash flow. So how much how much cash were you making in a summer, and then how much? Because I'm having this issue. Well, we have this issue with islands, right? Because from October to March, potentially April, because this country's shit with the weather. We call it hot chocolate season. So we've had issues whereby, we went into some retailers in April, and it's like, for fuck's sake, it's no one's fault, but because of the ranging windows, we're up shit creek without a paddle, because we're trying to sell hot chocolate season in the middle of the summer. So we're experiencing this battle now, and one of the ways we're trying to mitigate it is like, okay, let's make sure when we're going into new retailers that we're aiming for that September, October ranging window. There's no point in us. I'd rather wait 6 months than, but in terms of the cash flow for you guys, how much cash were you making in the summer, and how long was it were you trying to make that work for the remainder of the year?
So we'd be selling, upwards of sort of 1 to 1.5 million lollies per summer. So that was sort of in sort of totality, sort of at our sort of peak, which again means that you've got to build your stock level in sort of January, February, March. So in terms of from what is the sort of cash required, you'd have to basically build in all of your stock there. So we're basically producing before the summer kicks off. Then at that point, you're also relying on, obviously in our case, and a little bit like with the islands, the winter's more consistent than the summer. But we're sort of forecasting off the back of, are we going to have a strong summer? Are we not going to have a strong summer? And I think going back to your point about the retailers, which is sort of really interesting, we had a lot of sort of interesting deals, which people, what they call wigging. So when it goes, or sort of fixed term purchases. So retailers would buy a whole load of stock in the summer period. So for us, one of the issues we also sort of had was we didn't necessarily get the commitment from the buyers until quite late on. So, in some scenarios, I remember, getting a phone call from Tesco's, and would get a call in April saying, we want X amount of 100,000 ice lollies for Wimbledon in July in 600 stores. And, the frustrating thing that we had was, I was trying to speak to the buyers about that in January, saying, please, are we going to do this again next summer? If we are, please let us know. Can you send us some forecasts? Can we prepare for that? And that again made things very challenging. Just with some of the seasonality and the cash flow, a lot of it was very sort of last minute, which is why I think brands, if you have every business is skewed seasonally, but it's a lot easier if you have a slightly more sort of fluid sort of sales across the year.
And what if you were to go back to that period of time, or you just go back to the Pop's journey, say tomorrow, like what would you do differently and why?
I think obviously hindsight's a beautiful thing. I think I don't have a huge amount of regrets, because I think like lots of founders who are listening to this is we launched a business very young. I launched a business when I was 23. I had absolutely no FMCG sort of experience, and I think there weren't also back in 2013, 14 when we launched it, there weren't all these sort of amazing sort of platforms and tools. You didn't exist. Other, the likes of Young Foodies, the likes of Bread and Jam, some of these other sort of, which are great tools for people to leverage. They just didn't exist then. So we really felt like we were sort of learning on our feet every single day. What I think, creating a new category is always an incredibly challenging thing. So no one had ever done a champagne ice lolly before. That was just never done before. In a sort of sold to a retailer. I think there was some sort of, you can make champagne ice lollies at home or alcoholic ice lollies at home recipes on BBC Good Food, but no one had ever done this. And then when you chuck that in, that the 23 and 24-year-old are trying to do it with no FMCG experience, with no sort of path as well. And that's the thing, that totally new products into new categories have why it can be such a challenge, is because there's no sort of pathway. If it's a peanut butter brand, people know how to consume a peanut butter, where to find peanut butter, or the likes of other sort of products and other categories. Whereas if you're doing something that has never been done before, there's those challenges. So I think I would have probably chosen something that probably had a slightly more sort of clear path in terms of where it can be distributed, how it can be consumed. But obviously within all of that, you've got to find some element of innovation within that. We can't just be doing the same old stuff. So I would probably find a slightly more established category, product range, and probably put my sort of twist and innovation on that, which is probably what and looking back sort of 8-9 years ago, there's lots of opportunities to do that.
It's so fascinating because I interviewed Rory Sutherland, and he talked about the restaurant graveyard, like this theory about the restaurant graveyard. It's like you always hear about all the great restaurants that make it, but you never hear about the thousands of restaurants that didn't make it. So you're like, oh, I'm going to launch a burrito business, or I'm going to launch the next Franco Manca. You hear about all these businesses that, like the Franco Mancas, that have taken off, but you don't hear about the fucking graveyard of businesses that didn't make it. And actually, it's the same in FMCG. And I've interviewed a lot of brands that have said, great. And to be honest, I've been shouting about this as well, about create a category of one, create a category where there's no competition. For example, Moju Shots is a great example of that. Moth RTD drinks, great example of that. And I'm like, and it can be a beautiful blessing in that there's no path. You kind of have carte blanche on how you pitch it to the retailers. And that there's a huge opportunity for huge white swan growth. But at the same time, there's brands like yourself where it's like, oh my God, I wish there was some sort of trodden path. And I think this is why I love doing these conversations, is you learn so much live. It's like, you can create a category of one, but actually it's quite good having a steer of how things are done. I love the idea, like pitching to these retailers. What was the pitch to say, right, you haven't got a champagne ice lolly, a PIMMS ice lolly, but you need one? Like, how did you show them they needed something that they didn't know they needed? I love that. I always love asking that.
Well, funnily enough, I think there's an interesting point here, which is the sort of weird and wacky and innovation like we sort of had. In some ways, that was a really easy way to get a meeting because we were sort of so out there. On at that point, there wasn't something like that in the market, so we actually never we didn't have a huge issue getting meetings because people saw it. It wasn't just another of something, something that had a slightly different ingredient profile or slightly different makeup of some sort. So in terms of unlocking some initial sort of meetings, we were pretty good at that actually. I think naturally, and this is where sort of work with brands now. I think once we got into that room, we probably bogged it up quite sort of aggressively. Not bogged it up. I think we did the same thing that
bogged it up. What does that mean?
So bogged it up, like messed it up. So sort of when we got in the room, our pitch wasn't probably amazing. And I think what we did, which I see so many founders do at the moment, or lots, is a sort of common sort of founder mistake, is they get that meeting with Tesco's and they go in there and we just talked about the brand for an hour. So we just walked in there and talked about how lovely our brand was, how lovely our packaging was, look at all the events we've attended, look at some of these influencers we've worked with, all that stuff. And, that whole thing sort of needs to be reframed, which is sort of, in my view, you're spending probably about 10, 15 minutes on the brand and a lot more time on the category opportunity and how you can help them grow the category and all those bits. So we sort of, but the one bit where we always did perk up their interest was on the point of incrementality, because, there really wasn't anything like us in the freezer at that point. We were sort of significant. At the beginning, we were quite considerably more expensive than anything else in the freezer. So, we had a quite good story to tell, which is therefore, if we can get people to trade up from something like, we sat in the adult refreshment category. So other brands in that would have been the likes of sort of Solero, probably being sort of a mainstream sort of player in that space, so the sort of adult lollies. So we could trade people up by a couple of pounds to buy something with sort of an alcohol base to it. And we was a sort of a new occasion for consumers. We had quite a compelling pitch to sell into the retailers. And actually, after we launched the brands, we were able to secure listings in supermarkets. They weren't always plain sailing. One of the challenges that we had was around positioning. So the alcohol lollies that we had were all between 4 and 4.5%. So from a legal perspective, you had to be 18 and over to consume a product like ours. And although there's no sort of clear cut, hard and fast rule in terms of from a positioning perspective, some of the retailers were they were wary of putting our products next to in the same freezer as where a kid might consume their product. So we often had challenges in terms of positioning and just sort of, would they be comfortable putting something with alcohol in the same sort of freezer bay as something like a Clippo? And that was often a challenge that we sort of got back. It wasn't necessarily something that all the retailers, because we work with lots of retailers and lots of retailers ended up doing own label versions of our products and did it. So, but it was a common sort of feedback that we got.
We'll get onto that, and I want to unpack, and I always fucking say that word, but like I want to unpack that because that's a whole wild, delicious kind of territory to explore. Is once you're actually in the supermarket, there's a whole game of chess into where you actually position yourself in store, because that can make or break a listing. And I see so many of these drinks brands that go in, but it's like a 4-pack in the back of the store, and it's like it's never going to fucking work. Do you know what I mean? But what you said is, you said I bogged it up. Got the meeting, bogged it up. There'll be a lot of people listening to this who will have a meeting with a Sainsbury's, a Waitrose, a JS, an Ocado next week. Say they're going to go in there and they're going to just slather on the brand, which everyone's great at. what are the things they must land to demonstrate the category opportunity? And I know it's category specific and brand specific, but what are some of the 3 to 4 things they should have in their deck so they don't fuck it up?
So I think, and I just want to sort of reassure, that the brand is super powerful, and it's in a way to emotionally connect also with the buyer. And I think at an early stage, sort of connecting with buyers and people emotionally is a sort of superpower that bigger brands don't have. So I just want to sort of caveat that point that don't just walk in there and don't talk about your brand. Just manage that carefully, because it's a very sort of easy thing for people just to keep going on about, because it's quite personal. Going back to your question about the 3 sort of 4 things, I think you've obviously, lots of people talk about data and insight, and I think that is really that is useful to have. You need to have an understanding of what's performing well in the category and what is at the tail of the category. So the tail being the sort of the bottom of the category that's not performing, that's not adding growth to the category. So I think, one of the challenges for brands is some of that data is quite expensive. So they might think, okay, so where do we sort of get that data from? I think if you can afford to get data's always got to be in there, and you've got to have an understanding of what's performing and what's not performing, because that's what the buyer, when they're sitting on the other side, often on their laptop, that's sort of what they're looking at. They're going to be looking at the percentage of growth and decline and what's in that category that's in growth and that's in decline. I think also what I always like to do when speaking to the buyers is really, again, looking at I often go in and I very much I like to really know what's on their shelf. So I know if I've got a meeting with Co-op, I pretty much know top to bottom what's on that shelf. And actually, I'd always go in there and take a picture of it. And I'd also then, even if it's in a little bit of drawings, I'll start to map out everything in that category. So what sort of subcategory does everything sort of fall into in that category? And then when you can do that, you can even quickly, even if you're a challenger brand, see whether over-indexing and under-indexing on things, because you can have quite a sort of solid view.
Sorry for sounding like a Luddite, but
yeah,
please explain. If we maybe let's pick an example of this.
Yeah.
What do you mean by over-indexing and under-indexing? And the subcategories? I'll let you pick a category. Maybe ice cream or whatever.
Yeah. Okay, fine. So if we're sitting in the ice cream category, for instance, we're going to be looking at the bay of the ice cream category. If we sort of look at sort of the sort of tub 500, so the 500 gram sort of tub sort of area. Within that range, they will have some of their core products. So you're always going to have your Ben and Jerry's. You're going to sort of have your Haagen-Dazs in sort of 500 ml tubs. Then you're also at the bottom, you're probably going to have some of your 1 and 2 liters, like Kelly's ice cream, some of the bigger formats in there. Then you're probably going to have some of your sort of lower calorie and vegan products. So they, as a sort of planogram, so the planogram being how they position everything in the freezer or fridge or the fixture. Just by looking at that fixture, you'll be able to see what they've got a lot of in that fixture. So when I say over-index, I mean, what have they got in that fixture that is taking up perhaps the majority of that bay? So in the ice cream scenario, it might be a brand, but it also might be a flavor. So for instance, they might have 2-3 bays and shelves of Ben and Jerry's, but then they'll have a lot of Haagen-Dazs, but then across that, they've probably got loads of vanillas in there. So you can take quite a key argument to them and say, fine, vanilla is a core flavor within the ice cream category, but do you really need 6 different vanilla SKUs in there? Would tell me how that is going to then be driving that incrementality when you've got 6 vanilla flavors. Some of them might be from big, well-known established brands, and some of them might be from smaller brands, and that can help. But and just being open and honest with those buyers and asking them those questions. Can you explain to me why you need 6 vanilla ice cream variants in your category? and I'm bringing you something new and different. And trying to push those sorts of questions over to them in a sort of clearly visual perspective, I think always helps.
Love that. And just for listeners, why is incrementality so important, and like what's your definition of it? Because I even asked Chris D this, the founder of, well, not the founder, he's the founder of Maltzac, which is a whiskey company, but he was the old CEO of Booths, and he was the director of food at Harrods.
Yeah.
But like, in your opinion, mate, like, why do buyers actually give a fuck about, or why do they care about incrementality so much?
Well, because, unless it's an online retailer, they're not getting any more space, right? The shelf isn't getting bigger. So, they need everything in the fixture and space that they've got. They need everything to be performing at its absolute maximum. So if someone can go into that category let's use ice cream because we're talking about it now. Someone goes in and buys a vanilla ice cream, a tub of vanilla ice cream, but they also end up coming out of that purchasing moment, and they've got a pack of pops. That's just adding more top line, and there's no other equivalent within that category. So all it's just adding that £2, £3, £4 on top of that purchase above. And that's what they need. They just can't have any sort of, they're having any element of trading off. It's just not going to grow the basket spend or grow the spend in the category.
And I suppose if retailers are so competitive against other retailers, so if they can be the brand that's got if they can be the retailer that's got the new brand, they want that small 1% difference when the volumes are so massive. It's huge. I think that this is the way you've detailed that is beautiful, mate. And I think that's the roaring success of Little Moons. Back to the point of, Little Moons is the perfect example of, they were so different. They were 90% different, but there was still a 10% trodden path in that they were ice cream. Whereas I think you guys were so different, but you may have only had that 1% of trodden path, one, and two, you were so young, you were like 23. Whereas I know Liv and Howard, like this, when they went into retail, they'd already built a massive business in food service. Yeah. So they had that kind of safety net. So I think there's real interest in that. It's like, be different, but not so different. And that's one thing that Juliet Barrett said is, be different, but not so fucking different that no one knows who you are. And I think it's an art, not a science. Yeah, and then to your point about like showing the category opportunity when you're in the meeting, that is fascinating, and that's something I toy with all the time, because James Bailey, the CEO of Waitrose, came on the podcast and said, go for the hearts, not the heads. And I genuinely believe people make decisions with their hearts and justify with their heads. So I think what teasing this out and, pulling at the weed series is like, if you could maybe get to 60 to 70% hearts, which is brand, slather on that brand. But if you get that 30%, it says, like, okay, this is what's in it for you. This is the opportunity for the retailer. Then it's like, well, not game, set, match, pass me the oranges, but it's you're well on your way. And I think there's so much in that. So and I want to talk about. Go on, mate.
Yeah, I also think I think we've also just got to be, the sort of buying landscape, I think, has changed massively over the last certainly like the last 2-3 years, in terms of, we don't need to go into all the details, but everything that's happening in the sort of the wider market. So I think these, and I'm not disagreeing with the point that you made in terms of getting the percentages right, but I just think buyers are being so much more calculated in terms of the decisions that they're making. So I think it's just those necessary, like, if they were going to potentially make something a punt, and we say a punt, which is more of sort of the heart side, I just think those decisions are sort of more considered at the moment. So it's just trying to find that right balance.
Well, yeah, you're closer to me than me, mate. You selling for way more brands. So when you say the buyers, the landscape slightly changed over the last 2-3 years, which it kind of, well, it objectively has. Yeah. Why are when you say buyers are being more calculative, whatever how the fuck you say it, what do you mean by that?
So, again, at the moment, it depends. It looks at, let's think about, in terms of where we are from an economic perspective. We've got, inflation. We've got inflationary pressures through the market. They're dealing with a lot of price increases that are being sort of put through, especially from some of the bigger players. So, lots of the sort of the Procter and Gamble's, the Unilevers, the Diageo's, there's price increases going through the market. So there's then also naturally lots of sort of ongoing sort of joint business plan conversations that I believe are taking sort of longer, which I just think these sort of negotiation processes, or more, I should frame it in terms of the opportunity that challenges I think brands have in terms of getting the attention of the buyers is getting a bit smaller because they're sort of they're preoccupied by some of the larger multinationals that are delivering significantly the larger bulk of their spend. They're putting through price increases. They're sort of having pressures. So that's where the focus is going to. And of course, there's lots of noise about challenger brands and they're through the work that we're all doing. But in terms of and in terms of like great things like future brands, the Apery and Co-op, there's lots of sort of good accelerators, but that is sort of helping. But I still think these are pressures the buyers didn't have necessarily, or they had these pressures were less 3-4 years ago. And I'm by the way looking at that from a brand, someone who works with lots of challenger brands and is sort of on the coal face of those conversations from a brand side. So I just want to be careful that I'm not coming from it from a buyer's retailer perspective.
Yeah, for sure. And as I say, mate, you're way more privy to it than me, mate. So you shut down. You pour your life and your soul into this business from 2014 to 2019.
Yeah.
What I want to talk about kind of ego and shame and like how you dealt with that. We talked about the external forces for why you shut the business. How did it feel if we lifted the bonnet up on Harry Clark? What did that feel like? What was the darkest day in that period for you when your baby Pops is dying, to put it as bluntly as that, mate?
Yeah, sure. For me, one thing I was most proud of is the sort of team that we developed. We had a not a massive team. We had a team of 5-6 of us full time. Most people had been there pretty much since the beginning, or very for at least sort of 3 years of that sort of 5-year journey. So that's always tough. That natural. We worked in a warehouse in Wandsworth. It was lots of great times. Sort of professionally and socially. That's always super tough, right? Especially when we tried to, there weren't necessarily hugely obvious external sort of from the outside, even within the team. I think it still came as a shock to them when we decided to say, look, we're going to sort of wind things down. So I think that's sort of tough. I think some people have a different view on this, but I also found having conversations with, I sort of almost put me last. I would put myself last, and sort of I sort of dealt with myself at the end, really. I found the bit with investors tricky. I found that really tricky. We did a sort of very much sort of typical sort of challenger brand sort of way where we did friends and family to sort of to begin with. Then we sort of opened that up a little bit more, and then we had sort of slightly more sophisticated angels, and then we did a crowdfunding round as well. So having an investor pool of 400 people probably within that, with quite a lot of family, friends, and sort of people you sort of built up sort of relationships with. I found that like excruciating. Honestly, that was super, super hard. And I know everyone goes, oh, they're investing in a challenger brand.
Why excruciating?
I found it very difficult to tell people, they'd put money, Phil, when someone sort of put their money, gave us money, they put sort of, I took that very much as they're putting their trust in me. And then I just felt like, I just let a whole load of people down. And it was all sort of all our fault, that's sort of how I sort of took that. So, that was sort of pretty tough, I'd say. That bit of it.
And delivering uncomfortable messages to the team is something that everyone listening to this is going to have to do weekly. It's never easy. How did you deliver the message to the team, and could you speak to how to deliver hard news to people or your team?
I think be direct, kind but direct. I think I've certainly done this in the past, where you try and sort of make a big fluffy comfy pillow and then sort of make it nice, and then you land the punch afterwards. That sort of isn't the right way. I think you've got to be quite direct, explain the situation, but then you've got to be then really open and honest with them about the reasons why you're doing it. And I think so my advice would be is probably deliver the news maybe first, or that be if you're delivering something, be very sort of clear on what that is, and then afterwards you've got to, especially if people have worked for you and given their time and blood, sweat and tears, you need to give them all the sort of rationales of why you've chosen to do this and why we think it's right for the business or us or going forward. So yeah.
And how do you feel about it now? Like, how do you feel about it now?
Yeah, I think look, I've actually never spoken publicly about it ever until today. I speak to, I'm never, I'm very open and honest when I speak to people, down in the pub, or to my clients I work with now, but sort of in a sort of open sort of podcast forum. But I think I'm super, there's quite a few people who might not be aware of the brand. But I'm super proud of what we created. I think that's the first bit. So, and there was certainly enough success, across the years, from working with all the retailers, the global licensing deals with Diageo, lots of the sort of partnerships that we did, all that cool stuff. There's a lot to be proud of within that, and there's a huge amount that we sort of learned. So, at the moment, it's part of the journey. I'm super proud of it. I talk about it with sort of, I look back on it with probably 80% great times and 20% sort of not so great times. And I think over sort of a 5-6 year period, and me and my co-founder, who are still sort of great mates, we went to school together and we still see each other all the time. So, relationships that, within the sort of founding team have maintained super strong sort of 3 years later. So, all of that is, for me, I'm happy with.
And what advice would you give to someone who, it's interesting what we were saying about the heart and the head of when you're speaking to a retailer, pitching to a buyer. You've also got this heart versus head situation as a founder, where your heart is in the X brand, whether it's a chili sauce, fucking coconut oil, whatever. But then your head is saying, look, the market's a shit show. CPIs are going through the roof. We can't really keep the lights on. What advice would you give people having to navigate that? My heart's saying, I want to keep doing this, but my head is saying, we can't do this. Like, how do you navigate that? Because I think that's a really hard thing to navigate.
Yeah, uh, 1,000,000%. And I think uh, some of it's obviously super personal with founders and their sort of probably situation, their sort of personal situation. But I think probably the way that you describe it is how I would describe it. Is you've sort of, in that scenario, you've got to disattach the heart and the head, and you've got to go with the head. You know, or also, I do think, I think, it can be really, to people's sort of mental health and sort of their work, personal relationships. There's lots of stuff. If you keep grinding for too long and it's not working, it probably have bigger detrimental effects that you should probably think about as well. So obviously I can't say that for everyone, but yeah, I think you've got to think with your head in that point. It's difficult as it might be.
Well, so that's the reason I really rate you, mate, is that you describe POPs as a sequence in the journey, as in not the eternal, like the whole journey. This is like a step. HC Consulting could be a step. Like there's steps. Yeah. But what I want to go back to the beginning of the story. So I know you talked about you were like in Ibiza hustling. I think this is the first time we went for those beers in Wandsworth, like at the beginning of the summer. And I love, mate, the bit of the story that I just love is that gestation, hustle, grind, like that. You've got no fucking idea what you're doing, but you're just basically what I'm doing now with this podcast. That's why I love doing it. I've got no real idea what I'm doing, but I'm doing.
Yeah.
So what were you doing in the 6 months leading up to POPs? First question. Second question.
Yeah.
Where did the idea come from? What was the spark or the twinkle that made you think, right, the world needs a boozy ice lolly?
Yeah, so there's a pretty good story here. So to give it a little bit of context, I went to uni for a year and dropped out. I sort of got myself absorbed in the world of sort of nightclubs. I was basically a glorified club promoter in London for
Which
a
clubs?
number of just oh god, Mahiki, Whiskey Miss, Bodo Schloss, very sort of like slightly sort of schweffy premium ones. But
I've been to Mahiki before.
Yeah, but what that actually did, there's a couple of things that actually happened was, it was a melting pot for making contacts. I made a lot of relationships within sort of being involved in that environment. And the nightclub world is a sort of funny world. It's sort of, there's two things that happen that people work in nightclubs at a young age. There's either, in my experience, there's been some phenomenal entrepreneurial stories that come out of people that have been involved in nightclubs, who have basically harnessed this amazing sort of environment where you've got all these incredible, in the place that I worked, lots of very interesting people came. So you've got this environment where you can make a lot of contacts. And if you're smart, you can sort of use them, in terms of what you do next. So there's quite a lot of people who have done very exciting things off the back of being involved in nightclubs. There's other people who sort of drink too much and have too much fun, and they sort of have to leave that whole environment and they go do something completely different. I did that for 4 or 5 years, and I decided I didn't want to stay in the nightclub industry for various reasons, but most of it, I didn't want to be out all night all the time. So I was on holiday with a friend of mine on a summer holiday, and we were actually lying in a pool. This is my co-founder, and it was really actually his idea. And he said we're lying in the pool, and he said, wouldn't it be nice to have a sort of frozen alcoholic sort of treat whilst we're lying on Lilo's in the pool in Mallorca? And we said, I said, yeah, that's quite a good idea. That would be, didn't think that much of it. And then we sort of came with the idea that a Veuve Clicquot, the color of a Veuve Clicquot, this is sort of brings together some of the nightclub stuff. This is why I sort of bring the nightclubs into it. And my business partner worked in sort of PR as well. So essentially, we then looked at the colors of a Veuve Clicquot bottle, which is that sort of like iconic sort of orange sort of color, sort of yellow-orange colour. We then looked at a Calippo, which is exactly the same colour. And we thought, wouldn't this be a good idea to do a champagne ice lolly? But what we're going to do is we're going to develop a concept. We're going to take it to Moet Hennessy, who own Veuve Clicquot, and we're going to try and sell them this concept of a champagne ice lolly with Veuve Clicquot's logo on. That's basically how that was our original idea. We had no idea how to make it. We then so I'm battling on. We then basically came and we basically had no idea how to do it. So we walked around Soho into all the gelaterias and we asked everyone if they did a champagne sorbet. And we basically ended up that's how it started. We then went on about a sort of 8-month journey in terms of how to sort of develop this sort of champagne ice lolly. But the actual concept was that we were going to do a partnership with Moet Hennessy for Veuve Clicquot. And we got a meeting with Veuve Clicquot and we went and sat down with them and said to them, look, this is our idea and we want to go to all of your events and we want to do some sort of deal. I can't even remember how we were going to structure the deal. And then basically they sort of faffed around. We had a couple of meetings with them. They thought it was a cool idea. They took us to their offices. We went out for lunch with a couple of people. But we then got an opportunity to do this event, which I think it came through one of my sort of nightclub contacts, which was it was Miley Cyrus's after party, and they asked if they could get 200 champagne ice lollies from us. And we were due to do our first production run the following week. So we literally hand poured them in this gelateria in Soho, where we were sort of doing this sort of small batches. And then we walked them over to this club, Madame Jojo's, which is in Soho, about 100 meters. They're barely even frozen in the sort of Calippo stick. And then essentially we went to that event, and Miley Cyrus took a picture, and put it on Twitter. And we were and everything overnight sort of blew up. I can't remember what it was. We're in E! News in the US, and it was in the Daily Mail article. There's a Daily Mail article saying Miley Cyrus getting drunk on boozy ice lollies. And then we got Selfridges calling us. And then we got other retailers calling us. And we got all these guys. And Selfridges loved it because the colours were the same as the yellow of our colour was similar to their logo colour. So we had them phoning us saying, can we list it? Can we list it? So this happened overnight. And then when that happened, we basically said, screw it. We're not going to do anything with Moet Hennessy or Veuve Clicquot or anything. We've got Selfridges calling us and other retailers. We're just going to launch this business, Pops, and we're just going to go for ourselves. And then literally from that day, we never really looked back. But where sort of I come from that, we didn't really have this sort of FMCG sort of vision at that point. Our vision was taking it to festivals and taking it to events and doing these sorts of sort of partnership deals. That was sort of our vision, because I'd come from an events background and my business partner had been in sort of the more sort of PR world. So we weren't even at that point even thinking really about FMCG or sort of taking it down some traditional route. We sort of thought of it as this whole sort of events festival proposition, but it quickly landed into Selfridges and Fortnum Mason and stuff.
So what was the business model that you presented to Moet Hennessy when you bagged that Veuve Clicquot meeting? Because I don't understand. Because in my head, I'm thinking and I don't mean this in a really affectionate way. It's like if two young promoters come to me and like they've got this sick idea. If I'm Veuve Clicquot, I'd be like, right, let's just fucking nab that idea and go off and do it ourselves. Do you see what I mean? Like how are you making money in that original business model?
So I'd love to see the deck, what we pulled together. But basically we knew that, Veuve Clicquot are never going to go through the 8-month journey of finding out how to freeze an alcoholic ice lolly. Their business probably just isn't set up. Their business isn't set up. They don't do frozen. They're not going to do that, right? So how we positioned it, and this again comes from the background that we had, which was we often, in the nightclubs did deals with likes of Diageo and Ciroc and Moët. So we sort of understood how to structure those sorts of deals. Well, we thought we did. We probably didn't. Our idea was saying that Veuve Clicquot, I think we said, we would produce, let's say, 10,000 units for them. They would buy them off us. Yeah. So we had made money off that. And then we would go around to all of their events. So they did all those polo events and all that sort of stuff. And then they would pay us an activation fee to go around and activate for those events. So it was a combination of them purchasing the stock and then treating us as sort of an activations partner. And then they would pay us for us to go around all of their events. That was the proposition at that sort of time. So yeah, sort of a slightly different lens we came into the space with.
I love that, and I think I love the hustle, and it's like people think you need this magical eureka moment. It's like, just once you've got that idea, go and walk around every single gelato gaff, whatever it's called, in Soho, and just see, like, do you do a frozen strawberry, yes or no? I think it's just about building momentum, and what you've done there is action leads to momentum. I did a talk at Corson Press last week, and one of what they wanted was like, how do you stay like an entrepreneur as you get bigger? And one of the things we were talking about, and it's I basically lived my life by, is ready, fire, aim, which so many people want to make the decision of ready, aim, fire, get everything perfect, get all your ducks in a row, then go to market. And everyone I've interviewed, that never happens. And I think what you've done there is ready, fire, aim. Right, fuck it, we're gonna launch this. We're gonna see what happens, and then you build momentum, and then Miley Cyrus happens, Selfridges kicks off, and you're off to the races.
Yeah.
What I want to understand is how you ended up in Ibiza. Like, what was the game plan there? Why were you in Ibiza?
Again, this all... Okay, so our vision was that, it would help us build our brand to be... Again, we've got to think of the product. We've got a champagne ice lolly here, that we were charging in beach clubs €8-9 for. Yeah, that was the proposition in 2015 when I went over there, right? And,
I love the story, mate. Yeah. Wait, fucking buy some ice lolly, son.
Drove a couple of vans.
Yeah, go on.
Got some stock out, and our idea was, that's where we're gonna, we were trying to build this sort of within this sort of premium sort of luxury brand, and which had never sort of been done before in that sort of way. And for us, Ibiza was at the same time I was 25, and it would be quite fun to have. I was taking the business really seriously, but there was an element of it this will also be quite fun. But I'd honestly say that was probably one of the hardest I've ever worked, because it was just so intense in terms of the sort of labor of it. But yeah, again, we just thought, in terms of having a brand in Ibiza, as I suppose a bit of kudos, in terms of the people that we were trying to attract at that time. They were sort of holidaying there. It gave us great, our content at the time was sort of, Instagram, obviously Instagram was sort of present, but, we got amazing content of people consuming the product, what environment people might want to have an ice lolly, the events that we went to, it created a great backdrop to the brand, and sort of complemented sort of what we were doing in the UK. What was it strategically the right thing for me to spend the summer over there? And I remember James not being there. No. Would I advise a brand to probably do it now? Maybe, depending on their resource, but I probably wouldn't advise one of the co-founders to go spend the summer there. But that's difficult to say.
It sounds like you drew the long straw, though, mate. Sorry, Ibiza. So what clubs which beach clubs did you get the ice lollies in, and how were you getting hold of them? Because what you said there, the backdrop to the brand, and it's like, that's so valuable, and I think people don't necessarily think about that, and it doesn't necessarily have to be what's the like physical backdrop, but actually thinking of the brand, like where does this sit in a bigger context is so valuable. Because I think there's some brands, I won't give the name, but there's a brand who does an amazing chocolate, and the product is 10 out of 10. The branding's okay, but I think they should have branding with like fields of like the dairy and the cream, and adding all this beautiful backdrop to the brand. I think it would just elevate it so much. But I think what you've done there is you have done that.
And it really worked. Like, like the amount of, because we also did a lot of events and corporate events, and we had this whole sort of like events festival thing. That definitely sort of elevated our brand from a positioning perspective. And actually, why you then think about how some of the retailers responded to it, when we got into Waitrose and Ocado, Ocado was one of our first listings after Selfridges, Selfridges and these types of they loved that we were this sort of champagne ice lolly brand running around Ibiza doing all these cool events. It gave us a distinct difference to anything else that was happening. From, if you think of how a retailer looks at it, they're looking at their category, they're thinking, there's these guys running around Ibiza doing all this alcoholic stuff. That's really, that's different, that's interesting, and we're cementing our position as this sort of premium sort of challenger, but in this maybe more luxury sort of space. So actually, what I would say, without some sort of big sort of marketing mood board, I think that was our natural instincts of where we took the brand was actually what sort of made it what it was during that sort of time. So yeah, I think it was great in terms of where we took it. Probably, so I went on diversion there, but yeah.
No. I know it's so valuable. I also think back to this brand backdrop is what I love doing these conversations is you learn so much that you'd never even think about that would ever bubble up. But actually, if you'd launch Pops with the backdrop of going around and divvying out ice lollies on Clapham Common or Hyde Park, yeah, it would be cool, but it wouldn't have the gravitas of Ibiza. And I think it's something to think about. And what you said there is, you probably couldn't justify that decision on a P&L.
No.
But not as Rory Sutherland says, not everything can be justified on a P&L. And I think the razzle dazzle and the authority and the premiumization you get of just being in Ibiza elevates that brand. And I love that. So what clubs were you working at in Ibiza? What beach bars?
Gosh, yeah, we did a lot with the likes of El Chiringuito, Beach House, Ocean Beach Club, Pikes, I don't know how, quite a few of them, but it was hustle. Talking about hustle mentality, no one replies to emails. No, emails isn't a thing in Ibiza. Like it's WhatsApp. You call or you turn up. That's it. So
what were you doing? Like, talk me, what was the hardest pitch you did out of all those clubs? Because I love Ibiza. I think there's something. It is. I know it sounds so corny. It's like, oh my god, it's magical. It's magical. Like, it really fucking is. Like, it's like Disneyland for adults. But so what was the hardest pitch?
The thing is, though, it wasn't necessarily wasn't like hard in terms of like, it wasn't hard in terms of like, we would think about it in terms of, you're going and, you didn't have meetings in offices. You met people would say, come down to my restaurant or beach club between 2 and 4. And you sit there between 2 and 4, hoping the lollies don't melt in your freezer bag. And you just wait till the guy turns up. And then the hardest thing was getting their attention. That was the hardest thing. Once you sort of got their attention and you told them about the product, and, we had all these sort of we call them our popsicles. There was sort of our ice cream bikes. We had like a whole load of them on the island. So we would have a team in Ibiza. So we'd say, we can put a popsicle outside the front of your beach club. We can have 2 people serving them. We can sell them all afternoon, or you can put them on the menu. Or so we had sort of 2 sort of scenarios. But I think it was I think, the selling was, I think what I learned from that, it was pure hustle, in terms of, just relentlessness, and dealing probably with, no disrespect to Ibiza, sort of, it wasn't necessarily that straightforward in terms of some of the sort of dealings we were having, nothing like, untoward, but just, it was all very sort of casual. So, you got to,
You're rocking up with a suitcase of cash. I can imagine you bowling into El Chiringuito with like something out of fucking what's that program? Is it with oh my god, the names escape me. But like, I can imagine you walking in with like a Hawaiian shirt on, suitcase full of dosh, and like loads of ice lollies. That's so jokes, mate. But I love that because I think. Sorry.
No. Carry on, mate.
I was going to say, what I love, and I wanted to get some context, is like if you could hustle in Ibiza with these beach clubs, which are notoriously difficult to work with, then it makes going and getting a Sainsbury's listing not necessarily easier, but it gives you that backbone of like, okay, I know this is going to be hard. When you said it was relentless hustle, I know people like don't hustle. I think hustle is the most important word. Hustle to me is not working 16 hours a day. That's bullshit. That's dumb. Hustle to me is like having a really good network and knowing who's the right person to speak to at the right time and how to get your foot in the door. That to me is hustle. And actually, like hustle shouldn't be like, obviously it can be long hours, but a lot of it is actually just putting yourself in the right place at the right time. Yeah. What advice could you give to people who have to hustle? Like, how did you hustle?
Gosh, I think the whole sort of brand story is all about hustle really. I think, and I know it's me on the podcast, but my business partner is definitely was great at this. But we were literally like we wouldn't do apart from going to dropping on people's house. It would be phone, it would be WhatsApp, it would be, we would try and find every sort of avenue that we could find people sort of in and around. And I think using our sort of personal contacts as well. So I think what we were quite good at in these scenarios is we didn't just look at the buyer or the owner. I still continue to do that. In terms of some of the work we do, that, there's examples of this obviously in sort of more like traditional grocery, but what PR company do they use? In terms of like the stuff in Ibiza, who's the DJ? Let's DM the DJ on Instagram. Let's just try and find as many sort of things around the thing until you get that sort of impact. So whether it be the PR company, the marketing company, sort of any sort of other partnerships that they do, and that's as a brand we were very good at sort of getting in the back door, whether that be rather than writing an email to, you want to do a partnership with Wilderness, right? Music festival or whatever, never ever email Wilderness. Yeah. So, when you get your checkbook, you find out, who are the third party catering managers? Who are the third party events caterers? Who is doing all the freestanding drinks bars around there? Yeah. You find every single person around it, and that's the way that you go in. And that's how you hustle your way in. So, from our perspective, we'd see all these, we'd see Glastonbury, for instance, because we did lots with Glastonbury. We never paid a cent to Glastonbury. We would find who's got their restaurant there, with us. I can't remember their name, but they had this amazing little beach restaurant in Dorset. We'd find out, they're taking their restaurant down there, and they've got some amazing position and behind the pyramids stage. Yeah. We would then speak to that restaurant and try and get on their menu and then get in that way. That was always our, and that's, we didn't really pay for a huge amount when we did all of these sorts of event partnerships and collaborations and stuff in sort of Ibiza. We sort of mapped out the puzzles around it and then got in that way. And we always did that. And that is a bit of that sort of hustle mentality.
That's why I was so excited to partner with you, mate, because I love people who are high agency, people who believe that you create the reality. Like you've got the human being has the ability to create their own reality. And that's why I'm so excited for our partnership. But I think in terms of what you said there is building the puzzle around it. I love that. I think that literally describes what hustle is. It's building the puzzle. It's not working 16 hours a day. You could be working 16 hours a day and not putting the pieces of the puzzle together. It's just pointless. Hustle to me, as I said, it's that like, okay, what are the moving pieces and how do I pull this together? It's like it's ultimately a game.
It's a little bit like
what's the wildest thing?
Yeah, carry on. No, go.
Go on, mate.
Yeah, no, it's a
I was
little
gonna
bit.
say, what's the what? Sorry.
Wait, keep going.
You go, mate. You go.
Last one,
I'll shut my mouth. I'll shut my mouth.
it's a little bit like a crime scene in a movie, right? Where you've got, you've got the sort of suspect and everything's linking in, right? Or whoever's who they think is going to kill it. And you literally, it's all of those pieces of the puzzle, all those little connecting the dots, and that's just. By the way, that's quite fun. I think that's super fun for brands to try and work that out.
For sure. What's the wildest thing you've done to get a brand partnership or any deal really?
Well,
that you can say on the podcast. I'm gonna have to start calling you Harry Escobar, mate.
I think in terms of like the most like, we did some of this stuff, I remember, we did quite a lot, but this is all quite sort of well-trodden path now. So, sending buyers lots of sort of interest. We sent buyers lots of interesting. I think, remember, we got some very bad feedback because we sent a Sainsbury's buyer. I think our sales guy did it saying like, roses are red, violets are blue. All we want is a meeting with you, and sent her some flowers on Valentine's Day. And then she sent in this email saying her boyfriend broke up with her or something like that. And we gave her flowers and, sort of a full stop and nothing after that. So that was probably an ill-calculated move, thinking she sort of got.
You should have said, "Did you try the ice cream though?" Just get a pops down you, and that will sort everything out.
But I think what we and I think one lesson that I always will stand by is, never ever be afraid to go to the top. That is the one thing. So, for instance, we did all these Diageo licensing deals, right? And we sent our proposal to the CEO of Diageo. No one else. We started at the CEO, and we were like, we're going to start there. We're not going to go to the brand manager of PIMMS. We were like, let's go to CEO and let's start there. And it then got it got forwarded on. We never got a response from the CEO of Diageo, but it went to the global head of innovation or something like that. Next person down. Yeah. And she was like, great idea. Really love to explore this. I'm going to take this on. Another example of that is just another good one is the way when I look back when we got our Tesco's listing, the first email I sent was to John Allen, the chairman of Tesco's, 100 up, because we met him at an event and I got his email address in an event. And then it went to the CEO of Tesco's Europe. And then it went all the way down. Those are like two pivotal points in our journey when we just thought, no, I went to an event where John Allen was speaking, which I was very kindly invited to by one of our investors, a woman called Rita Clifton, who's an amazing woman. He said, John Allen's going to be there. You guys should come. We got our 30 seconds with him. We got our business card. And he said, send me an email. So, it's, I'd always, I think founders can be afraid to go to the top, and there's no harm in doing it if it's done in the right way. What's the worst that's going to happen? You put your brand in front of someone, they haven't seen it, or they have and they responded. But as long as you've done it respectfully, I think respectfully is probably a nice word here. I'm always an advocate for doing that.
Love it. So yeah, go straight to the top. And you said do it in the right way and do it respectfully. Again, at the talk at Course and Press, one of these points was, because one of the questions I get is like, how do you land guests? Like, how do you get big guests?
Yeah.
It's like I've got 883 Instagram followers, for fuck's sake. but it's like one. I do the same thing as you, mate. Go straight to the top. And the way I ask it, I'm very respectful. And well, the point was, it's not what you ask, but it's how you ask it, and how is the operative word, if that's how you say it. But how did you do it? Like, what was the email you wrote to John? Or what was the what was the email you wrote to the Diageo CEO? Like, what did you specifically put in that? Because that will help lots of listeners, I think.
Yeah. To be fair, we had a vision, which is we wanted to do a PIMMS ice lolly. That was sort of a sort of, one of the day one goals for our brand was we wanted to do this. So we and we had done quite a few partnership deals before. So before that we'd done a big collab with done a Fortnum Mason lolly. We'd done a Fever Tree one as well. So we had a few in our. So this is just for context for everyone. This is basically when we would put the Pops logo and also like the Fever Tree logo, and we'd make a Fever Tree cocktail, and it would be a co-branded deal. And with the Fortnum Masons, it would be a lolly, but it had all the Fortnum Mason like branding on. So for us, it was sort of these sort of partnership deals. So we had quite a few sort of case studies that we could show them. We also showed them what it could look like as well. So, when we did because we didn't just send them an email, we did a full on, I can't remember how many pages it was. There was a proposal saying, this is how it could look. This is what it means to us. This is what it means to you. And this is what we want to discuss. And we had even mocked up designs of how we thought the PIMMS Ice Lolly could look like. We had all those rendered images. So, I think the answer to that is you've got to go, if you're going to go to the top, you've got to go and super prepared. It's sort of, because you're probably not going to get that. It depends who you're going with. So that was sort of in the case of the Diageo example. We really sort of, we were like, this email is the moment, sort of thing, and let's put all of our resource and time behind to make it look amazing, and sing what we wanted to say.
I love that. It's doing the heavy lifting, and there's a book. I don't know why this has come to me now, by Malcolm Gladwell called The Bomber Mafia, and he talks about in the World War, where we were putting our resources in terms of killing the Germans, and we were putting all our resources on loads of different things. Also, we were trying to like attack here, attack there. And actually, we realized if we just bombed and we spent our resources on bombing the ball bearing factory, we would wipe out the Germans, because the ball bearing factory is what produced everything. It was what produced the tanks. It's what produced the everything, all stemmed from this. I'm not saying, and drawing the parallel to what you're doing, it's like, okay, we could spread 100% of our resource across 15 different buyers at different stages of the hierarchy, which may work. Or we could put all our resource into this one email to this one person and do so much heavy lifting, do the rendering, do the mock-up, show the opportunity, that all that person has to say is yes. And I think there's so much in that for our listeners. It's like, you can go to the top, but if you're going to go to the top, do all the heavy lifting, so that person has to just say, make it so hard for them to say no to it. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah, and I think, and by the way, to sort of, round this all off, we were going to buyers at, the normal level and getting no responses like everyone else, right? But if I actually look back on where some of the step change moments happened in the business, it was when we sort of took it maybe out of the home it should have been in, which is sort of with the bar within your category, or within the sort of brand manager. If you're doing something, trying to collaborate with a brand, we took it to another area. That is often, in our case, where we saw success. And as you say, sort of going back to that sort of hustle mentality, trying to understand, where are these people hanging out? What events are they going to? There's obviously a big sort of speaker sort of circuit, trying to, which some people go, oh, it's a lot of time to drag yourself out to that event at 7 p.m. at night, to have the 5% chance of speaking to that one person, so, but, those are often the moments where, it can happen, but, there's probably 20 occasions when that doesn't happen. There's one occasion when it does, but, you start working off those numbers with the sort of bigger, sort of game change sort of moments, and, you'll get some level of success out of it.
And how did you make money when you're partnering with, say, a Diageo, say you're making a PIMMS Ice Lolly for the retailers? Yep. What does the commercial model look like for that?
So context, as everyone knows, Diageo, multi-billion-pound business, Pops, tiny little business in the grand schemes of things versus Diageo, right? So they're not in it, and this is we sort of went, but they're not in it for the money, right? They're not in it to make even if they took 50% of all of the profit or revenue off it, it's still not even going to move the needle. It's going to do nothing. It's not going to. So you've got to look at it from, okay, what can we add value when we're doing these partnerships? Where can we add value to PIMMS, for instance? So, for instance, okay, alcohol generally is a difficult product to sample, right? Yeah, because of the nature of it. Like, you're not going to give a small gin bottle out. You can, but people aren't just going to start necking. Well, some people might start necking a tiny bottle of gin on the street, right?
Depends how stressful your day's been, mate.
So you've got to think of it from the lens of, okay, so what are they going to get out of it, right? So, for instance, in the likes of what we were doing, if we get it listed in the supermarket, it's now got a fixture and a home in the frozen aisle. Wow, we're in 600 Tesco's. We've just moved ourselves directly from BWS, beer, wines and spirits, into frozen. Amazing fixture space. Yeah. Now people are enjoying a PIMMS. It's a different consumption occasion, or it's similar, but they're consuming it as an alternative to having a Clipper or a Solari or a Magnum or whatever. So suddenly opening up a new consumption occasion for them. It's a new way for people to trial the product. So I go back to the sampling bit, right? They've got this mechanism that they can now sort of sample. It was amazing for, we did this thing where we had like the press pack for our PIMMS pops, and then there was a press pack for the PIMMS, and ours was bigger than PIMMS. We had generated more PR, and I don't want to be exactly quoted on this, but in terms of like the amount of organic PR we were able to, because it's not that exciting for the Daily Mail to write about, it's the summer, everyone go to the pub and have a PIMMS. Everyone's like, yeah, whatever. Yeah. But, it's exciting for them when it's 25 degrees and everyone's going, oh, it's, first day of summer, to go, have you seen these new PIMMS ice lollies, now available on Ocado, whatever, that creates a buzz because it becomes a moment. And that's what they're looking for. They're looking to create that moment. So that's what's in it for them, not, how the deal was structured. It wasn't structured in a way that they were ever going to make, vast amounts of money, or even if we were to sell 20, 50 million of the, it's never still going to, well, it might, but, it's never going to be a massive game changer. Also, by the way, we were buying the PIMMS liquid off them, and we had a deal on it, right? But so, they were actually getting quite significant volume in terms of us being a PIMMS customer, because we were buying actually a lot of PIMMS to fill up the ice lollies as well. So, they were sort of getting volume that we would we'd have a sort of friendly deal on that. But so I think there's a lot in it for brands, and, the power of partnerships is something that I probably don't focus on as much anymore, but it is something I love.
Partnership. Rory Sutherland says this. I think it's from Mark Ritson, which is like, and I do believe this. I think partnerships are probably the seventh wonder or eighth wonder of the world, mate. Like, in terms, it's just win. The one I reference all the time is Calm and Trip. I mean, that is just, again, Liv, founder of Trip, met the founder of Calm at some Soho house, which I know is you can take from that what you will, but like either way, they met at that, went right to the top, and next to each other. Next thing you know, the biggest meditation app in the world is partnering with this new up-and-coming buccaneering challenger brand. It's like everyone wins. The big business win because they want to be seen to be cool. The cool business win because they could leverage the big brand. The small cool business win because they leverage the big brand. So did you bake into that deal, like they would share it on... because I'm just trying to think, there'll be brands listening to this who can, anyone can leverage a bigger brand partnership, but it's just like how to go about it. So I think going to the top's one. Did you bake into the deal like you're going to share pops on your socials, you're going to do X, Y, Z? Like, what were some of the things you put in the deal to make sure you're not just getting their logo on your product? I know that's still pretty big, but
I think going back to the lens of like really thinking about their business and what they're, going back to like there's some of the bits I discussed before, like what they're going to get out of it, right? Like if you're thinking about going to a bigger brand, the first bit I'd probably say is it's probably not a revenue driver for them. Yeah. So that's your first bit to sort of, I wouldn't spend a huge amount of time creating a P&L. If you're trying to do, if you're a smaller challenger and you're trying to do with a big multinational, some sort of element of partnership, like I don't want to say, every business is different, but the numbers probably aren't compelling enough that's going to get them that excited from a financial perspective. So then you've got to think, that's when you've got to get your sort of marketing, brand, creative head on and saying, so out of what, for our brand, what can we give them that they would find very difficult to do? So if you've got a retail proposition and sort of that mentioned, like if you can get them into a different category, yeah, I think that's a game changer, right? Because you've sort of, if especially if you're in a not in a category that they have expertise in terms of they don't have the production to do, or they don't have the relationships and so on, especially these big businesses that have a very sort of they can't just jump around category very easily. So I think you basically being able to sort of show them that you can get much more eyeballs on their brand. And then I think, again, the trial bit is really, they want trial and they want new consumers. So trial of new consumers is golden, right? Because, trying to find, new consumers within your category is often a challenging thing. But if someone's like, okay, I'm trying to think of a sort of, so Bailey's is obviously like that's like one of the big ones, right? So like, Bailey's, they do like Bailey's chocolates, right? And those are super popular. So, someone might not necessarily, this might be an interesting example. Someone might not actually drink alcohol, yeah, but they might potentially be interested in a Bailey's chocolate, maybe that's actually not a good example because they want someone to go back in and buy the Baileys afterwards in the BWSR. So I'll reframe that a little bit. But someone who really likes chocolate, loves chocolate, and is just a chocolate fanatic, they then suddenly see Baileys chocolate in the chocolate aisle. They buy a pack for that. They take it home. They have it. They go, oh my God, I love Baileys. I haven't had Baileys for ages. Yeah. I forgot what that flavor profile is all about. And then when they're next in the BWSR, they go pick up some Baileys. That would be the key. That would be a great metric to be able to pitch into whoever you're targeting. They're trying to find people that don't shop in their category. So if you can pick them up in another category, that then drives them back into the existing category where their home is. That's a super powerful sort of proposition.
You're almost, what you said about the crime scene of hustle, which I think is a beautiful way of putting it. You're also, in terms of, you've got also a superpower in terms of problem solving from the other person's side of the table, which is what's in it for me. And the way you're doing that is almost creating not a crime scene, but a problem scene. It's like, okay, well, if we launch this in this channel, how does it impact that channel, that occasion? And it's fascinating. What I'd love to go into is like your where you grew up. Like, where did this ability to hustle and problem solve come from? Like, what was your background like growing up? Like, what were your parents like? What was your kind of story in that regard?
Yeah, really. So yeah, sort of. Parents are not from a sort of I would say they're, entrepreneurial in terms of, they've worked in sort of more traditional industries. So sort of, in sort of finance sort of industries. So doesn't come from necessarily sort of a world of sort of entrepreneurship. Always was very sort of, they've always been sort of open for all of us, my brothers and sisters, to do sort of our own things and pursue what we wanted. As such, I think, I don't know, I think I've always had that sort of hustle sort of mentality. One of the things is, I'm actually a twin. I've got a twin sister who's actually academically a lot more clever, smarter than me. So much so actually that when we were like 7, I got put down a year and she stayed in her year because because I think they found it difficult that we were in the same classroom and she was just so much, on a sort of different level to me. Um, and therefore I think that sort of element of, as you talk about, hustle's become sort of quite a topic on this. And I think, I always sort of knew from sort of those sorts of moments when you're younger, you've just got to work extra hard. I was always sort of trying to fight at school to sort of get myself in that position where I was sort of like, where sort of maybe some of the other people were, or suddenly, having that dynamic where I had sort of, sort of Annabelle when I was younger. So I think that sort of having to go above and beyond, always sort of just, sort of just trying to go for it, and not take no for an answer. I think it's sort of slightly in the DNA. I also somewhere thought I would always be better rather than doing something which you can sort of, I think it's interesting. I think maybe some of these people listening might think about, wouldn't it be easier? Sometimes you see your friends in more traditional industries, and you go, it'll be easier just to go, I don't know, work and get a stable job somewhere, wherever it is, right? I'll just be a bit. You sometimes have those moments when you're an entrepreneur, you're going, God, just be easier. And I've definitely had those over the years, but I always sort of had this sort of burning ambition that I know I know I will be, if I can sort of run the course of sort of my sort of career or trajectory and be the sort of guy sort of, I'm the master of that. And I always thought that would be my sort of calling. So I think that's why I've just always pursued sort of my own thing. Obviously, I had opportunities to go back after sort of finishing Pops, which was to go work at a corporate, and I had some interesting conversations with some established businesses about potential roles, but and lots of people might have thought, just go do that because it's sort of, you've come out of a difficult sort of position. But that wasn't for me. It was just sort of, I just thought, I thought it would be a bit of a waste. I think almost like done this, and this is another thing for maybe some founders to think about is I thought, I've done all this hard work, all this learning, the steep learning curve, like, I need to use that and I need to build on that. Go back to like, I need to use everything I've learned and I'm going to build on that. And I'm just going to give it as that stepping stone. I thought if I just then had taken a not sidestep, but, gone and, joined a larger business and be sort of slightly pigeonholed, I just thought to myself, what a waste, done all this stuff, then just sort of have my wings clipped and not use half of it. I just thought was not that exciting. So yeah, maybe like a combination of all those factors, really.
What does your sister Annabelle do now?
She's very successful. So she is a deputy headmistress in a school. So she's doing amazing work.
And do you think that gave you a bit of a chip on your shoulder? Not a chip on your shoulder, maybe the wrong way of saying it, but like it added a certain level of fuel to the furnace that you probably wouldn't have got otherwise.
Yeah, I think
that
I don't know.
Need to, that need to constantly to do the extra mile kind of thing.
Yeah, I don't know. Other people who sort of dyslexic and sort of weren't amazingly academic. I was sort of probably actually middle of the road at school, but when I was a lot younger, I struggled in my earlier years. I struggled and then sort of somehow sort of caught up a bit. But yeah, I think that's sort of far within you. Sometimes when you've been a bit of an underdog, you sort of and you've been pushed down a bit. It just sort of gives you. It can go either way. It gave me sort of energy and motivation, and if you don't work hard, if I don't work hard or if I don't work extra hard, it's going to be even more difficult. So yeah, that was just sort of my motivation.
That speaks deeply to me. So what I want to talk about now is moving to consultancy, and let's not beat around the bush. The word founder is very revered. The word founder is you go to a dinner party, you'll say that you're the founder of this champagne ice lolly brand. I've been in Ibiza, or Ibiza if you're at a proper posh dinner party, Ibiza. But you know, it's very revered. And I talked to my mate James Hickson about this, who actually he went from he had a booze business, a beer business had three sites in Southwest London. And he went from being the founder, you know, it sounds good to be a founder. There's a lot of ego involved with that, to then going back into full-time employment. And he said it wasn't necessarily difficult, but it is a change. People are like, oh my God, what happened to the business? Are you okay? Blah, 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 blah. But the word consultant, like, it gives quite a lot of people the ick. Like, I'm not even gonna lie about it. Like, I won't say that I was at having a meeting with a buyer, and even I will never say, oh, I do consultancy. I kept it kind of shush. But I remember going to a meeting with a buyer, and she was like, I cannot stand consultants. Like, a lot of them just come in with it's almost like with a suitcase of different shit to sell. Like, do you know what I mean? So yeah. Like, let's kind of, how did it feel to go from like this revered founder up here to HC Consulting? Like, has that come with some pushback necessarily, or how's that felt for you?
Yeah, I know what you mean around the sort of word consulting. I sort of battled with that a little bit, like when I was sort of, should I call it consulting or not? But anyway, that's yeah. I sort of get what. I mean, for me, like it's 100% come out of a love for, and not to be corny, you know, I honestly, I do this because I love working with founders. You know, I love having the ability to try and impact in a positive way, founders, you know, that are either starting up or thinking about starting up, or, you know, slightly further ahead on their journey, but still need some support. You know, it really has come out of a love of that, you know, in terms of dealing with the sort of, now I'm a founder, now I'm a consultant, ego thing. You know, egos, I've tried, you know, I've tried that not to be sort of within my sort of, I don't think I've got a big ego, so I don't think that has really sort of, I've really focused on trying to just value. I think, you know, I get the biggest kick when I work with people and brands and they go, look, Harry, you've offered me so much value, and it 100% comes from a good place, because one of the reasons I wanted to get into this was, you know, it wasn't, you know, I got into it sort of in lockdown and stuff. So that was sort of, it wasn't necessarily like a massive strategic move, but when I started to get into it, you know, I kind of came on to thinking, I just really wish I could try and give people what I wish I had, and you know, all the stuff I didn't know and learn, and if I can sort of try and package that up and help other people. Obviously, you know, it's not a charity, it's a business, but, you know, that's the bit where, you know, honestly, and still now I love that, and it is addictive, the energy of working with founders and new products, and the other thing is that I honestly wouldn't, if this industry was full of dickheads, I wouldn't do it. You know, that is something that I love, is, you know, I really don't think I've met many, you know, dicks in this space, and I know I'm not saying there's lots of founders are listening to this. Like, in terms of the clients that I work with, you know, like all of them are just like pretty much, and you know, there's been a flow of clients that, you know, I don't work with now. Like, you know, like 99%, 95% of them have been just like great people to work with. Like, you look forward to your Zoom calls, you look forward to your meetings, and like for me, that's sort of equally important as sort of like staying in this game.
Yeah, I completely concur with you. I think I don't think you're going to get a better industry, and I think that if you really boil down why I do this, so I genuinely believe brands have the power to change the world, and you know, I'm interviewing Who Gives a Crap in they're an Australian based, you know, the toilet brand, the bog roll, yeah. You know, they're giving away like half of their profits. That's sick. And they're creating a brand that makes people feel
Yeah.
amazing. Tomorrow, I'm interviewing Jez, who's the founder of Union Coffee. Like, they put on the map. They've solved so many they've saved and improved so many lives in Guatemala, in Colombia. And that's because people are consuming a brand. Like, I just think brands are just they're superheroes. They have the power to change things. And I'm, if I could be part of that party, it's sick. And also, look, we're recording this in lunches, the trade show lunch. Like, I'm so excited. Like, some of my mates I've got just mates in this industry that are just as close as my mates, my home friend. But you know, it's a wonderful thing. What would you say? And you've worked across loads of brands of different stages. If you could thread the needle through these brands, like, what are the common 1 to 3 pain points, hurdles, headaches that they experience first, and then second, like, what are some of the remedies you found to those headaches?
When you say headaches, so like,
so for example, I know. So for example, I know from just brands that I speak to and brands that I've worked with, is availability is a common thing across pretty much every brand until you get to that 5 million mark. Is so many brands focus on getting that listing, but then not building that relationship with the supply chain team, not being all over the availability, wondering why the rate of sales gone off a cliff. And it's actually like, it's not because you've done anything wrong, it's just because you haven't solved that availability puzzle. Like, that's an example of like a common pain point. Do you know what I mean? But what have you experienced?
I think so going maybe a little bit sort of I think from like a strategy perspective, like, that when you boil it down and you take sort of a step back a little bit, I think what I continually see brands make mistakes in is just just for context for people, like, I pretty much work mostly on like anything that sits under sort of like the sales and sort of commercial sort of strategy. I think I see that people are focusing on the wrong channels is with sort of the wrong product at the wrong price. I think there's sort of like a conundrum across those sorts of areas, and then also people focusing too much. You know, they're just focusing on way too many things that essentially that they're not being necessarily like focused enough, and they don't get the results that they sort of want. So I think in terms of like taking a step back, and maybe these are some like the more early stage founders, is really looking at like what channels they should be operating in. What's the sort of go-to-market strategy within that? So the go-to-market strategy sort of leads everything else in terms of then what's the product strategy, then what's the pricing strategy, and then how do you execute it? I think for me, it's sort of like...
So just quick.
Yeah.
Sorry, mate. I shouldn't have jumped in there. Sorry. Got excited.
No worries. Yes, I think... Yeah. There you go.
Sorry, mate. It's like a game of tennis, this. When you said the channel strategy, the go-to-market strategy, and the product strategy, could you give some definitions of those, please? Yeah.
So if we look at your go-to-market strategy as a sort of founder, so you've got a product, right, that you've sort of produced, and then you're then looking at sort of all the sort of channels that are sort of available to you. So, you know, we've talked quite a lot about grocery, right? So you've obviously got grocery as a channel. You've got out of home, which might spread out, right? So in out of home, then you've got things like food to go channel. You've got food service channels. You've then got like travel retail. So there's multiple sort of channels that you can focus on. And the bit that I see most founders do is try and take a bit more, taking a very sort of wide approach on that. and what they do at that point is they're missing certain sort of like sort of inflection point sort of milestones, or milestones is probably the right bit, which is, let's just say, for instance, you've got your go-to-market strategy. Then once you got to your go-to-market strategy, you've got to then look at what products that should go into that. So what I think people say, I feel like I'm sort of murdering this, but what I actually think, lots of brands sort of create the product first, and then so they create the product first, and then afterwards they sort of like have this sort of shotgun approach. But if they sort of reverse it a little bit back, where they sort of think of the go-to-market strategy, and they think what channels they definitely want to hit first, then they think of the product, then they understand what price they need to sell it at, and then they go execute it. Do you see what I mean? So they're sort of, they take that sort of, they really understand the sort of go-to-market and their sort of channel strategy that then basically informs their sort of product strategy. Do you see what I mean? So it's working that way around.
Yeah, completely. I think we had that at Islands. Like, we started as a chocolate bar, and we were trying to force it into loads of different retailers, loads of different channels. Realized that didn't work, and then, I mean, there's so many different ways to get to the same point. But then we realized, okay, there's a huge opportunity in cooking chocolate. So then we started creating products for Michelin star chefs, and that worked really, really well. But then with our new product, which is like a cocoa powder, like imagine like a banging cocoa powder, we looked at, okay, so baristas, the reason they can't use our chocolate buttons, or they sometimes struggle to use our chocolate buttons, is because it takes bloody ages to, the speed of service at a coffee shop. At Starbucks, they need to bang them out the door pretty quickly. Yeah. So we looked at that problem. I suppose we're kind of looking at problems here. Looked at that problem, reverse engineered it back, and we were like, okay, we can create a cocoa powder that we can use, linking this back to the farm, is that we have all this excess cocoa from when you actually melt down you turn it into a chocolate button. So we can solve that problem there, turn it into a product that no one's making. It tastes better. And now that, we've got that into stores, and that has just gone, it's gone absolutely flying. But the issue, but we tried to sell stores chocolate bars. They were like, nah, mate, like George from stores was like, what are you trying to sell me, Pope? Like, he was like, what are you trying to sell me? And I think there's a lot of, it's really interesting is getting that channel strategy right. What are some of the most underrated channels, do you think, that where most people don't play? Because I personally I think grocery is amazing, but grocery is the channel. Grocery is like the Russell Group University of channels. It's very good that for your parents to say, oh, I'm in grocery, and it's great for LinkedIn, and it's great for, but there's actually so many other channels that no one else plays in. What are some of those channels do you think that are kind of
and I think it's down to the brand, right? So I've been working on this brand, this amazing brand called Ninju, which is just launched, right? And it's we basically do 200 ml super juices for kids. It's really new on the market, right? And if you sort of imagine the functionality of a shot, so what a shot gives you in terms of functionality, packaged in a 200 ml carton for kids. Yeah, and that's basically what we've done. We've created a brand all around adventure. So it's around tasty adventure, fuel your adventure. Yeah. So in terms of when you look at the packaging, we've got amazing monsters on the face of it. It looks very sort of like, very different in the market. It's not a sort of mumsy sort of Corsten press or farm shop Pip Organic. It's very much sort of maybe veering more on your Monster Energy sort of bit, and it's really dialed up. So then what we've done out of that is gone, we're going to be an out of home. Yeah. But then from that out of home bit is we're just going to be in places where kids really focus on adventure and being active. Yeah. Because that gives us a complete different, from a position perspective, to anyone else in the market. Because our whole brand definition has been about tasty adventure, fuel your adventure, giving kids all of the hidden veg and all of the bits that give them the best energy. So then, as a result, we're only focusing on out of home. But then when we're going down more specifically that into channels, we're focusing on trampoline parks, we're focusing on go-karting tracks, we're focusing on soft plays, we're focusing on anywhere where a kid will be active in the space of adventure. Yeah, goals, kickers, all these sorts of places. Phenomenal the amount of volume that you can get out of these places, right? Yeah, and we walk into these places with this really well executed brand, packaging looks amazing in terms of like how we're positioning ourselves, and they just walk in and they get it. Because if you put a Corsten Press, and they've got nothing against Corsten Press, I'm not here to but that's a perfect environment for a sort of farm shop and a sort of lovely sort of nice sort of villagey place. But we've gone right down, and I think that's sort of how I sort of start to think now, is sort of actually, as well as getting, so you think of your go-to-market strategy and the channels that you want to play in, and then you start thinking about the sort of product and the brand and the identity and the consumers, and then you sort of start channeling it that way. If you do that piece of work right, you should end up with, and in that example, we're winning so many listings and all these places I've never heard of. Like the founders are coming to me saying, we're in Clip and Climb. I've never heard of Clip and Climb. It's like 50 climbing centers, right? Yeah, all these sort of so that's like a sub segment of out of home. That's in specifically around obviously the kid sector, right? But I hope that sort of gives a little bit of sort of context and sort of just like trying to be super focused. And then when you start winning in that, don't then get overexcited. Now we're just thinking with that brand in particular, we're thinking like we haven't even scratched the surface of all these kids places. Let's just keep, we know it's working in there. We've got the pitch that works. We've got the product that works. We're proving the rate of sale works in there. Let's keep in there. Let's not try and go maybe to where some of the other players are in the market, where the Corsons, let's let them have, the Pip Organics and the Corsons, this whole Southwest London bit, they can sort of own that. We'll take a whole nother part of the segment, which is far more aligned with the brand and the mission and what they're going after.
Mate, I love that. And the gorgeous example I use all the time is Piper's Crisps. Piper's Crisps.
Yeah, amazing. Didn't go to grocery for years.
Every brand, right? Every brand under the sun was, as I wrote in my newsletter, which there'll be a link in the show notes, just saying. But when knocking on the door with a JBP and their laminated JBP, begging for a Sainsbury's or Waitrose listing, Piper found farm shop speciality as an area to play in, focused relentlessly. I think what you said there is so true. Once you find a channel and you get it working, you can think, okay, you can sometimes think, right, that's working, I need to go and get this one working. Just go deeper, narrow and deep. Yeah.
100%.
Mate, this is we've been talking for a while. I've been absolutely loving this. We're gonna have to wrap this up. One final question, mate.
Sure.
What would you say in one sentence is a brand? What in one sentence? What's your definition? Because you've worked with so many, you've built so many.
Good question. For me, it's for me, a brand is something, whether it be a service or a product, that can make an emotional impact on me, that basically wants me, that will allow me to give me sort of motivation to invest in it, whether that's sort of buy it or serve it, and that's what I love about brands mainly, is sort of how people can be so creative to create something that creates that emotional value, emotional sort of a value, and that will basically get me to put my hands in my pocket and sort of buy and invest on that journey. And I think for me, that's the emotional side of building a brand is for me the sort of it, and being able to get consumers to tap into an emotional state that allows consumers to sort of ride with you on that journey, is for me, like, brands can do that. Obviously the product and services, goes without saying, has to be right, but from being able to, any brand that does that, can serve that sort of emotional value and also deliver on what they're saying they're going to deliver. It's sort of a magic combo.
Mate, I love that, and yeah, it's been an absolute joy talking to you. As I always say, I say this at every podcast, there's always one central theme. Yours is problem solving and hustle, and I loved this analogy of creating this crime scene and like the web, but then also like the crime scene for problem solving is like what are other ways you can solve people's problems. But mate, that's been wicked.
Thank you for having me. It's been awesome.